This is a brief explanation of how you would make a hard slab polyhedron. Maybe more accurately or more honestly, this is a plea for people who work in hard slabs, ceramists, to make something more complex than cubes when it comes to this process. It's played out, it's overdone, and it's very straightforward how you would make something more complex. So this is going to be an explanation of that. I'll pepper in some tips here, but brief rundown, polyhedron are forms that have many faces, typically more than 6 faces. So you can go in a lot of different directions with this kind of thing. So here's what I've started with. This is a truncated tetrahedron. Well, it doesn't look like much now. It looks like tiles on a floor. But that's because this is the net model, sort of template for building this particular polyhedron. So you'll see down below here this link to an enormously helpful website, and I'll link it outside of the video as well. Visit that place and you'll find all of these different templates for paper models essentially, but you can take these same exact layouts just like this and transfer that to a slab and then create a form out of it, obviously something more permanent. But check out that site, take a look at all the different possibilities, I'll show them built, and then if you like the way that that form looks, you can just grab the net model and you're good to go. So here's where we begin. You print out that template. Again, there's the truncated tetrahedron here that I've selected for mine, and then prepare a slab, just like you would for any other kind of hard slab project. So whether you roll that out or you use a slab mallet, whatever your preferred method is, just make sure it's consistent. That's pretty straightforward to those who have been working in the medium. So once you've done that, the next step is to trace that on. And by trace, I mean you lay down that net model, that template, and then you draw over those lines with a needle tool or whatever instrument is going to give you a precise enough line. Like I'm saying below here, don't press too hard. There's no need to tear through it or anything like that. Just light enough so that you can see an indentation on the other side. If you leave it sitting there too long, you'll find little bits of paper stuck in those corners. So best to just do this and then peel that paper away carefully so then you don't just have to fight with all these paper fibers stuck to the surface of that slab. But that's where you begin. So accuracy is the name of the game with this sort of project. You obviously want to be accurate when you're tracing this template onto the clay, but then you also want to be accurate as you're cutting these shapes out. There's room to mess up all over the place with this. In fact, every single step could accumulate into a bigger problem in the end. Little things here and there might not seem noticeable at first, and then it comes together in the end in a bad way. So make sure that you're accurate and be precise about it. If you see something's gone a bit squiffy, then simply retrace that particular shape out. Get it to the same consistency, the same dryness level as everything else, and then you should be all right. Make sure you're accurate as you possibly can be as you're going. Now, you want to make sure that those slabs are getting on their way to that leather hard, or sometimes called cheese hard stiffness, where it's holding up a little bit and it doesn't just smush around when you're trying to cut it. But once you do have them cut, you need them even more dried out than that, not bone dry, but a little more advanced leather hard. And when you're doing this, when you're getting to that point, this is very important. Elevate those slab pieces on some kind of a baking rack or mesh of some sort so that air is in contact with all sides. Get asked all the time, why is my slab curling around the edges? It's probably because you had it face down on the ground on some surface and no air could get to the underside. So here's what's happening. It's staying moist underneath and it's drying out on the top. So it's curling that top piece because it's getting too dry, and that other underside is still elastic, still plastic from being wet, so it's able to stretch along that bow that's forming. If you keep your slabs elevated like this, there is no reason why they should be curling. They should stay nice and flat. So whether or not you're making a polyhedron or something more simple than this, elevate those slabs when they're drying out. Another important point, and this goes beyond just what I'm showing right here, with any slab work, when you're putting together sides of slabs, it's best to do a bevel, about 45 degrees, on all of those edges that are connecting. There's two reasons for this. One, you're going to have less of a seam showing on the outside, which is very hard to disguise in the end. No matter what you do, it will tend to reemerge at some other point in one of the firings or in the glazing stage. If you put them on a 45-degree angle like this, you'll only have that one little shared seam at those edges, easy to hide. Also, you're maximizing the amount of surface area that you'll have for these things to connect. Instead of just being one end on that edge, the other side, you're going to have these two shared faces that come together. And of course, then you would score these and slip them. And so when you are preparing these, it's also important to keep in mind that when you put the slip on it, don't just immediately cram those sides together and start assembling it. You'll find that the slabs will slide around quite a bit. You don't want that. You want to let those slabs sit there with the slip on them for just a minute or so, maybe longer than that. And what's happening is you're getting more moisture to permeate that side that you're adhering to the other side there. So you're not re-wetting that entire slab, that entire shape, just that edge, just getting a little more moisture inside of there. And that's going to help it stick together and gum together a little bit better. So if you're having problems getting your slabs to stay put, this might be one of the reasons why. Just let it sit there for a moment. Obviously not too long. You don't want these things drying out again. You just want to get that a little more wetted in a local area. Now, pushing these sides together is obviously going to require a little bit of pressure. You want to make sure that they're jammed together enough that you see something like this, where the slip is oozing out somewhat from those edges, but you don't want to press so hard that the slabs shift off of one another. Because with polyhedron, you have, again, lots of these times in the process where you can screw up. You want to try to be as accurate as possible every single time, so in the end, it looks the way that it should. And with this, if you have something off even just a little bit, it might look right for that stage, but then you start introducing other pieces, whatever they might be, and suddenly they don't fit right. They're falling inside. Something's gone off along the way. Be accurate as possible, but still making sure that you're pressing these slabs together hard enough that you have a good, strong connection. You don't just want to lay them against one another. It will not make for a good adhesion point there on those corners, on those beveled edges. So you'll be at the point then where everything's connected and you can smooth out any areas. You'll see with this one had a little bit of a gap in some of the places. Not too hard to, add a little bit of clay to or smooth down the side to get that to go away. You could also use something like a shear form tool. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it looks like a cheese grater. Shave off the sides of it, and then you can take a rib and then smooth them back down again and get it looking nice and pristine. But also, do not forget, don't get lost in this process and forget the idea of poking some kind of a vent into your form. Unless you're firing this very, very carefully, unless you're firing it on your own and you can absolutely watch all the steps, you need to make sure that you don't make this into a bomb. A bomb in the kiln where all of that heat and moisture works itself up inside and forces out all of the seams of your form. You want to have somewhere for all that to escape, so poke some kind of a hole in there, maybe a little bit larger than a needle tool. Stick a needle tool in there, wiggle it around some. It's easy enough to hide later on in the decorating processes, but that way you'll make sure that this does not blow up in the kiln. I would always advise with everything that you do in ceramics to let it dry as slowly as you possibly can. Slabs are particularly that way because all of those edges that are lined up very perfectly, those are going to want to open right along those seams if it dries too quickly or it's fired too fast. Let it sit wrapped in plastic for at least a week, longer if you can, letting it get, maybe take it out of the bag for a little bit, put it back in, and do that for a week or two so that it slowly dries, slowly loses that moisture that's inside of it. That way it won't be such a shock to any one of the parts and won't cause stress along the seams. So that's also important. Don't get overly excited and put it out on the drying rack too quickly. Let it sit for a little bit if that's possible. And so in the end, you'll have your bisque form if that was all fired and put together correctly. And then you have something so much more interesting than a cube. And it's really not that much more difficult. It's just a matter of being precise, being accurate. And I think that with something like this, you immediately engage the viewer much more than you would with a cube. Every way that you turn one of these polyhedron is going to give you a different look. So I would encourage you to try this out. Go to the website that's linked on this page. Check it out. Try it.